guys, Ping Yao here. Welcome to another episode of New Falmouth, my City Skylines series set in New England, that neck of the woods. So this episode is going to be a little bit different to what I originally planned, because the original idea was to try and start work on the downtown area of New Falmouth, but as usual things change when I'm playing this game. Not sure why, but I kind of got slightly waylaid and started on a bit more of the Oldtown. And you can see this shot here, all these empty city blocks, and the plan was originally to start filling those. But no, I felt that actually it made more sense to just try and finish off some of these blocks close to where the old town is. So these areas here I'm building is a little kind of residential neighbourhood, and it's sort of wedged in between the train tracks, as you can see there, and of course you've got the old town literally right up against it. So I felt probably that this neighbourhood would have been part of the original Victorian kind of expansion of the city, and is a kind of conservation area, which is why a lot of these old houses are still sort of here, and it's all protected and preserved as a kind of like historical part of the city. So this is very typical of a lot of kind of New England and more kind of historical cities, let's say, in America, where these kind of areas have been protected. So slightly unusual, I guess, just because a lot of American cities tend to be more modern. But New Falmouth, as you will know if you've been watching the series, is much more of a historical town. So there are quite a lot of these kind of areas, especially in the centre of the city. And bearing in mind this is right next to the old town, which is just at the top of the picture there, then it makes sense that this area is also a historical sort of neighbourhood. Anyway, I'm rambling away as usual. The plan is in this episode, as I mentioned, it has changed somewhat, and what I end up doing is focusing in on two quite large city blocks in the old town. But they are strategically quite important. They are slap bang in the middle of the city, and they are also in the kind of transitional area between the old town and the downtown neighbourhood. So that's really where this episode has kind of developed into. And the original plan was to start work on the downtown itself, but I'm still slightly nervous about doing that, because as I think I mentioned it previously, as soon as I start putting larger, taller buildings in, it's going to change the appearance of the city quite dramatically, I think. And I just want to fill it out a little bit more before I get to that stage. So by doing these sort of neighbourhoods particularly, that just helps to sort of fill the city, give it a little bit more context before I get stuck into the downtown and all that good stuff. So you can see here, very, very, very green area, lots and lots of trees. I've been having a look on Google Earth at some cities, particularly the eastern seaboard sort of cities in Maine, and also in Nova Scotia in Canada, and particularly Halifax, which is quite a green city when you look at a lot of the areas around the centre of the city, lots of trees and so forth. So I want New Falmouth to kind of reflect that kind of theme with quite a lot of trees. Now what I'm doing here is a little bit of housekeeping. I'm adding custom tags to a lot of my building models, so I'm changing a lot of those or adding those tags so that I can find buildings easier, and I'm doing that not just for this city but also for my other city project as well, and that's actually speeding up my workflow. So if you can do those tags, it really does help your workflow, I think. And also just doing a little bit of housekeeping on some of those road junctions. So yeah, quite a lot of just jigging around with the city. Not a major build this episode, but one I think that is quite important just strategically in terms of how I'm going to push push the city forward. So this is the first of these large old town city blocks that I was talking about. It's a strange shaped block, as is common in this part of the city, because this is the older historical quarter known as the Old Town. And I wanted to put down a large kind of city hall type building, and I think this probably will become the city hall for New Falmouth, because it has that kind of vibe, and it's in a very good location, right on the front there, right next to the fish market, right in the centre of the action. And although it's certainly not in the downtown area, it could be that I end up doing a more modern city hall later on in the series, depending on whether I think it's necessary or not. But certainly this is kind of like, I imagine, would have been built in probably the end of the 19th century, this building. It's actually a model by Darth, and I think it's called the Jubilee Hall. So I'm guessing it might be, I don't know if it's American or European building, I've got to be honest. I think it possibly is American, but anyway, it fits here really well, and the model is absolutely gorgeous. This honestly is my favourite building now in the city. It's just absolutely beautiful model. So much detail on this building, so I think it really does deserve to become the city hall for New Falmouth, or certainly the original city hall. And I was wondering, maybe it's been turned into a museum or something like that, which is sometimes what happens, especially if the city hall needs to be expanded or modernised. Sometimes these older buildings then be turned into museums or galleries or something like that. But anyway, I don't know, possibly that's something to think about in the future. If you guys can think of what this building could be, if it's not the City Hall, then do let me know in the comments. And you never know, I might decide to change it into that, particularly if it becomes an art gallery or something. But anyway, what I'm now doing here is obviously using PO again, just to stretch out these planters to sort of wrap around the stone balustrades here. And this is wasn't quite sure what to do at the back of this building, but this is to become a little kind of public square. And in New Falmouth there aren't too many of these kind of squares and parks and things. So again, because it is a historical American city, I thought I would put some squares in, because there was a lot of influence from Europe during this sort of time, and sort of taking some of these kind of public squares, some of these kind of ideas from Europe to make sort of public spaces, I think kind of works quite well for this city, because the Old Town especially is very much influenced by European cities. A lot of the modern American kind of cities and architecture obviously hadn't been developed at this stage. So this is more influenced by European cities than anything that you would have seen in America at the time. And I just love to add all these little details. These are sort of little tree planters here, and obviously putting some little street trees there. And honestly, the trees that we've got now at our disposal, it's just amazing. And honestly, we've got so many trees, I don't know where to start. And I often end up using the same trees a lot of the time, which is not a bad thing, because it helps to keep the theme of the city working by using similar sort of trees and assets and things. Now, this is the real conundrum. I just didn't know where to start with this block. Now, this block's been like this for a good couple of months, ever since I did the Old Town, which is probably a good 4 or 5 episodes ago now. And I had that building there, which I imagine might be a little market or something like that, but that didn't really fit in this block, so I put that over the road. Then I had this building, which I liked, but whatever I did, I couldn't really get this building to fit in this location. I'd put some walls around it, and it just didn't seem to kind of pull together. It didn't seem to work in this spot, and I kind of was struggling. And usually I've got an idea for city blocks or areas as to what I'm going to build, but with this I didn't. And the problem is the location here. Now, what you've got in the middle of this area is this main avenue that bisects the two halves of the city, in effect. Now, on the left side here, you've got what will be downtown, which is much more of a late 19th, early 20th century development in terms of road infrastructure and so forth. On the right, you have the Old Town, and you can see here the irregular street pattern of the Old Town. And this block here is slap bang in the middle of that kind of transition. So I had this great big apartment building to the north there, which is huge. In fact, that's the largest building in the Old Town, that big apartment building you can see. But then I didn't really want to put little kind of Victorian houses, which I've got to the south, up against that big building. So what I ended up doing was putting these smaller apartments in, and then falling back on what I often do when I struggle to think of an idea for a part of the city, which was to build a nice park instead. So if in doubt, and if you can't think of what to build, then just put a park in, because parks can sort out problems for you in cities. Plus, when you've got strange shaped city blocks like this one, then a park will just fill the area, and it will fit and it will work for you. So if in doubt, put a public park in. And also, I think the park here in the middle of the Old Town, the heart of the city, would be a really, really nice kind of thing to have for your city. And especially if it's a historical city like New Falmouth, it makes sense to have a nice park there in the middle of the action. But before I do the park, there's just this little area here which I wanted to finish off. So again, I put some smaller scale kind of Victorian houses in here. So you've got this slight kind of step up from these houses to medium-sized apartments to the much bigger apartment building that's actually off the top of the screen there. And then once I go across the main avenue that borders this area, then you've got downtown itself, and obviously then you're going to have a lot of bigger buildings then kicking in. So it was just trying to work out a nice transition from the Old Town to the future downtown, which was causing me a lot of issues. But I think the park really resolves that, because it will create this kind of buffer between the Old Town and the downtown. But anyway, I am going to have a little bit of beer, and then I'm going to come back and chat to you a little bit more about what I'm doing with this park. I'd like to say I was having a nice American bud, but unfortunately I'm not a great fan of American beers. I do prefer a nice Belgian beer if I can get one. So what we are doing here now is getting the kind of perimeter of the park set out. The park itself is fairly unplanned, fairly unorganised. I don't tend to kind of rough out the design of a lot of the stuff that I build. Although sometimes I do, and especially the city itself and how it kind of looks with its skyline. I've already roughed that out, so I know in my mind's eye how I want it to look. It's just a question of getting it to look like that. But recently I've been quite pleased with how it's starting to look, New Falmouth. It has a vibe, it has a kind of atmosphere now, which is really what I was hoping I could achieve in City Skylines. So it has a kind of unique look to it, I'm hoping. And I really love to just sort of fly about and see what's going on, because there's times when you kind of just get a little bit lost in just looking at stuff, and sometimes I think, I'm going to build this, I'm going to build that, and you end up building nothing. You just end up just flying about looking at stuff and getting some nice screenshots, and and just enjoying the city. But as I say, it's starting to come together, so I'm quite pleased with how it's generally looking. And this little park that I'm doing here, it's I think it just kind of contrasts quite nicely with the area around here. It is that sort of city park that you get. But it's just quite nice to do some nice building work for a change. My other city, Santa Caprizia, if you have been watching that, you'll know I've been building a lot of kind of industrial stuff in that city, and it just makes a change to do something nice, because I don't do too many nice builds with this game. I often find I'm either building things like oil depots or factories and stuff, infrastructure and things like that. Sometimes it's just good to do a little bit of building and making parks and stuff. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much the end of the episode. I can't believe it's literally gone in a flash. So I am going to sign off now. I hope you enjoy these little cinematics here. And there's the park, and you can see shots of that in its context. And until next time, I have no idea what I'm going to be building next time. Possibly we will be starting downtown, but I'm not going to promise. You're just going to have to wait and see. Until next time, I'm going to sign out. Take care, and see you later. Cheers, guys.